Good evening or good afternoon, depending upon where you are. Good morning, depending upon where you are. Welcome to another Manuscript Monday. I'm Brian Kathenes, your moderator. Tonight I get to be your presenter, and I'm delighted to do that. Been doing that for quite a while here with the Manuscript Society on Manuscript Mondays, and it's just going to be a final time. So as I do that, I'm going to share my screen and get things moving here. And we're gonna fire it up. If you have any questions, I'm going to put a little something in the hold on. I'm going to put a little something in the chat room here where you can text my cell phone number. I'll do that in just a little bit. So with that in mind, let's just fire it up. Thanks for joining us tonight. It is awards night, Oscars, Emmys, and Grammys, oh my, and maybe some Nobel Prize medals too, and a few other surprises. I was waiting for Jimmy Kimmel to call, ask me to fill in for the Oscars coming up. Since this will be recorded, someone will watch this many months from now and wonder why the heck this guy's got a tux on. So there we go. So here we are. Just note the Oscar disclaimer: Oscars, Academy Awards, Academy Award, Oscar nights, and the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences is a registered trademark of that organization. We're going to be using some pictures of the Oscar tonight, and we don't want to break any rules. So with that, we're going to fire right into it. Here we go. So here's what's happening tonight. The sponsor of our Manuscript Mondays, which happens the first Monday of every month, is the Manuscript Society. We're celebrating our 75th anniversary this year, and we're glad you could join us tonight. Why a webinar? Well, it's the easiest, fastest, and cheapest way to reach out to a whole bunch of people from all across the world. These are recorded, so it's at some point you decide to ask a question and you'd like to ask it over the Zoom call. You will be recorded. I'm just going to let you know. Right now, all of your cameras are off and all of your audio is off. So you're fine to sit on a couch, put your feet up, and munch on chips or whatever you do during your favorite webinar. Why now? First Monday of the month, and we've been doing it in order to share information about what we do. We're a not-for-profit organization, an educational organization that's designed to help our members and the world know a little more about what we do and what goes on in the world of manuscripts. And tonight, other three-dimensional collectibles. Who is invited? All the Manuscript Society members. It just goes up on Facebook and on Instagram. We thanks to Kevin Siegel, who helped promote that. We promote it on our sites. We invite members of the appraisal associations, the International Society of Appraisers, the American Society of Appraisers, and the Appraiser Association of America, as well as folks from the Society of American Archivists and a lot of other book collectors, book organizations, and manuscript organizations. What are we going to cover? I'll get to that in just a little bit, and also tell you about how we get a little bit more information on the organization and what we're going to talk about tonight. So some of the things we'll cover tonight: is it legal to buy or sell an Oscar, a Nobel medal, a Tony, or an Emmy, or any of the military medals we might talk about? How do we determine the value? How do professional appraisers determine the value of these things? Are gold records really gold? How can you tell if they're genuine or not? How important is provenance, the history of that particular piece, where it came from? Do you want to own one? Well, there could be some trouble to go with some of those awards, so we'll have to talk a little more about that. Let you know what they've sold for. I'll give you some comparable sales data and show you some auction sales and some private sales, and we'll talk a little about who decides who gets these awards. There's always a spot about the presenter, so with that, I'll let you read a little short background about me, and then we'll get right into the program. Okay, let's keep going. The Oscar statuette, might as well start there. It's kind of a really good place to start. It's a stylized figure of a knight holding a crusader's sword, although you can't really see the sword, and he's standing on a reel of film with 5 spokes on it. Each of those spokes represents the original 5 branches of the Academy: actors, directors, producers, technicians, and writers. Is manufactured by the UAP foundry up in upstate New York. Takes about 3 months if you want to order one. anybody just can't order one. And it's called an Oscar because Margaret Herrick, who was the Academy librarian who became their executive director, said that it looked like her uncle Oscar. And that's where Oscars come from. It's really called the Academy Award of Merit. It was issued first in 1929, stands a little more than a foot tall, weighs about 8.5 pounds, almost a sack of potatoes. And there's more than 3,000 of them have been presented. The designer was a guy named Cedric Gibbons, and George Stanley's a sculptor. You're going to have to, you'll know those, and they'll be important a little later on when we talk about identifying genuine Oscars. It's solid bronze, and it's 24 karat gold plated, but it wasn't always like that. And as I mentioned a little about Uncle Oscar. I got another guy here for you. Come here, I'll go to the next slide here. His name is Harold Russell, and I put him up here. He's an old friend. He was an American World War II veteran. He lost both his hands during the war, and he was cast in a movie called The Best Years of Our Lives, 1946. He played a character called Homer Parrish, and Kathy O'Donnell plays his wife. He's the first and only actor to win 2 Oscars for the same role, and the first non-professional actor to win an Academy Award for acting. He was also the first Oscar recipient to sell his award. He died in 2002. Let me tell you a little more about Harold and why it's important. As I said, he was the first person to ever sell an Oscar. His Best Supporting Oscar sold for $60,500 to the seller. It netted $50,000. It was sold in 1992 by an auction house called Herman Darvik Auctions. I was actually just with Herman last week. I was at that sale. Harold claimed that he was selling the Oscar because he needed money for his wife's medical expenses. That turned out not to be the case. But he did serve on the President's Council on Disabilities, which was usually formerly called the President's Council on Handicap Employment. And they got the term handicap out of there and talked about disabilities. He actually served with our past president of the Manuscript Society, a guy named Ed Bomsey, who you probably all know. It's important to know about Harold's Oscar because that's the first one that shows up. And really, the Academy weren't too concerned about it. But after 1950, you're not allowed to sell Oscars except back to the Academy for $1. So they attempted to prevent the sale with some lawsuits, and then they made some changes to their policies. I put that policy there. If you want to read the whole thing, just go to oscars.org/legal/regulations, and you'll know a little more about it. But he caused quite a stir in the industry because no one had ever thought about doing that, or at least they had never done it. Some may have been sold privately and quietly, but this was the one that really kind of got things going back in 92. From there, it got a little crazy. And you wonder who buys those Oscars. I don't remember who bought Harold Russell's Oscar, but I can tell you that Steven Spielberg bought a lot of Oscars. In 1996, he bought Clark Gable's Oscar for It Happened One Night, that 1934 movie. He paid $607,000 for it. He donated them back to the Academy. In 2001, in July 2001, he bought Betty Davis's Oscar in Jezebel, the 1938 movie. He paid $578,000 for that one. That sold at Christie's. And the next year, he bought Betty Davis's Oscar for Dangerous, a 1935 movie. He paid $180,000 plus the buyer's premium and any taxes at Sotheby's. Not only Steven Spielberg, but others do. But Spielberg bought these because he wanted them send them back to the Academy. He believed that it was appropriate for them to stay there and not to be peddled like collectibles, which apparently they are. In 2003, David Copperfield bought Casablanca director Kurtz's 1943 Oscar for the 1939 movie, which won Best Picture. He paid $232,000 for it and reportedly sold it 10 years later in 2013 for $2 million. I can't verify that, but a lot of the press will say that it went through a West Coast auction house. Not sure about that. In 1999, Michael Jackson, and you probably heard about this one. There's a big stink about this. Michael Jackson purchased David Selznick's Best Picture for Gone with the Wind, $1.54 million. He bought that at Sotheby's. Jackson died in 2009 at age 50. In 2016, The Hollywood Reporter ran a story that said the Oscar was reported missing from the estate. Nobody knows where it is. I don't think it showed up yet. So if you see it, You're going to do okay with it if you can find it. In 2011, Orson Welles' Oscar was reportedly sold for $861,000. Now, there's always some kind of controversy around these, and it's important to know what that goes on. So if you're thinking about praising them, buying them, selling them, writing articles about them, make sure you get all the information. Welles's Oscar was offered for sale in 1995. It was supposedly given to the seller from Orson Welles, but Orson Welles' daughter sued and got possession of the Oscar, and then she was going to sell it. So the Academy sued her. She had put it up for auction. They pulled it from the sale. She prevailed, and it was sold privately. The owner consigned it to Sotheby's in 2007, the one who had bought it from Welles's daughter, and it didn't meet the reserve. And I don't know what happened to it after that. But provenance is important to figure out what hands did it come from? Did it truly pass from one person to another? There's a lot of stuff going on with clear title and provenance are more issues than authenticity, not only in these, but in manuscripts and documents and replevin and all the other challenges that go with that. So with that in mind, let's just keep moving forward here. I want to just get a closer look at Oscars because most of us don't get a chance to handle them and hold them up. And every time I managed to appraise one, I would hold it up like I got one. So this is these are imaged by Heritage Auctions. These are things that show in at Heritage. If you take a closer look at the Oscar itself, again, this one's solid bronze. It's 24 karat plated. On the bottom, you can see this button that was placed there. It's an engraved button. This was for Robert Ruskins for writing the screenplay of It Happened One Night. He got an Academy Award. It was a 1934 picture, Columbia Pictures thing. Romantic comedy, Clark Gable was in it. Claudette Colbert, Walter Connolly. It sold in 2019 for $120,000. Powerful movie, powerful actors, really well known. This is, and the screenwriter is certainly important. Usually not as valuable as a leading actor or actress in a particular movie of that particular Oscar. Here's another closer look at it. If you look on the picture on the left, you're going to see right here it says George Stanley in 1928. I mentioned he was the sculptor. There's the bronze foundry listed right there. And over here on the picture to the right, there's something on that too. Now, like I said, they weren't always all bronze. Notice the movie reel with the five different wheels on it, or five spokes of the wheels, each representing the different areas that the Academy issues awards for. During the war years, excuse me, Oscars were made of plaster. They were not made of bronze because there was a metal shortage. So during the war years, you will find these out there. This is an unattributed Oscar, meaning there's no mark on it. It doesn't say who it went to. It just talks about this being a temporary trophy. Handle it carefully because it's plaster. If you drop it, it's going to break. And after the war, they said they would give you a bronze one if you turn this one back in. So that's something about Oscars. So I'm going to get away from Oscars for just a little bit, and let's talk about other kind of awards. I'm going to switch gears to Nobel Prize medals. This is a picture of Alfred Nobel. He was born in 1833, died in 1896. And I just put a couple of his quotes up there. I thought they were pretty interesting. And I'll tell you a little bit about him as you read the quotes. He was born in 1833 in Stockholm, Sweden. He was a chemist, a scientist, an engineer, an inventor, and a writer. And he's probably best known for creating and funding the Nobel Prize. And his biggest invention, or most well-known invention, was a real bomb. He invented dynamite. He did that in 1867. And what dynamite was, or is, it's a much safer way to transport nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin was a liquid. We take very small amounts of a variety, a version of nitroglycerin for angina and chest pain and heart ailments. But this is a really powerful, unstable explosive. And they would transport it in bottles, and they would suspend the bottles with rubber and put it in straw. And a lot of times things would blow up because it was so unstable. He mixed this with a bunch of solids, and you got that stick of dynamite, as you know. And you can even throw a stick of dynamite in the fire, and it wouldn't explode. You need another powerful explosion to make it go off. He died in 1896 after he held more than 355 patents, and the synthetic element nobelium, atomic number 102, is named after him, for all you chemists and scientists out there. This is a picture, images of the first and the last page of his 4-page will. And in it, he stated that the prizes should be awarded to those who during the preceding year shall have conferred the greatest benefit to humankind. And you can actually, there's a little site down there. If you give me a holler after, if you want to be able to see pictures of it. You can go on the Nobel website and you'll see his will. There are 4 pages, just showing you the first page and the last page. Okay. Here's what a Nobel Prize medal looks like, kind of up close. It's 66 millimeters in diameter. That's standard. The weight and thickness varied in the past depending upon the price of gold. And up until 1980, these medals were made of 23 karat gold, almost pure gold. 24 karat is pure. 23 is really, really close to it. Since that time, in 1980 and beyond, they've made them out of 18 karat recycled gold. The weight's set at 175 grams for all the medals, except for the economics Nobel Prize, which is a little bit different, and that weighs 185 grams. But that's what the front looks like. It stays the same the whole time, no matter who you are and what years. That hasn't changed. Let's just take a little bit about this. And here's some facts about the Nobel Prize. First awarded in 1901. Every year, it's been awarded every year with a few exceptions, including World War I and World War II, 1914 and 1918, 1939 and 1945. Sometimes we forget that World War II really got started in 1939 for us, for the United States of America. We didn't get involved in a war till December of 1941. Nobel Prize categories are physics, chemistry, physiology or medicine, literature, I should have a comma there, and peace, the Peace Prize. These were laid out in the will of Alfred Nobel. This is what he expected. In 1968, Sweden's central bank established a prize in economics made in memory of Alfred Nobel. And you hear about the Nobel Prize in economics. It didn't come on till later, till 1968. In Nobel Prize award in 2022, the award, as in money, was set at 10 million Swedish krona, and I convert that today to about $953,000. Interesting story about that, if you know a little something about Albert Einstein, who was getting close to that award. He wanted to get a divorce from his wife, and there was a lot of turmoil around his life and around his marriage. And he said, look, if you give me a divorce, when I win the Nobel Prize, I'll give you the money. And she accepted the deal. I don't know if that ever happened, but he did win the Nobel Prize at one point. So there you go. I want to take a look at the edge of a Nobel Prize. They pretty much, the medal, they pretty much all look the same. They're marked 18K. You can see there is a there's a hallmark here. There's other markings that just lets you know it's 18K for 18 karat gold. I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories about the Nobel Prize, being a chemical engineer that I am. It's about what happened to the Nobel Prize medals of 3 Nobel Prize laureates. They had earned them in physics during World War II. The medals, 2 medals were Germans, Max von Laue, and he won it in 1914, and James Franck, he won it in 1925, and Niels Bohr, who was Danish, he won it in 1922. So Bohr's Institute of Theoretical Physics in Copenhagen had been a refuge for a lot of the German Jews. You know, during this time preceding World War II, the Jews were pushed out. They were persecuted. The idea of intelligent Jews and all of their discoveries were set aside. That Germans could, you know, true blood Germans could have figured all this out, and they really didn't need Jewish physicists to do this. So it was a refuge for a lot of these Jewish physicists and scientists in 1933. Max Laue and James Franck had deposited their medals there to keep them being from confiscated by the Nazis. So after the occupation in Denmark in 1940, the medals were in Bohr's possession and his concern. And according to a chemist named George Hevesy, he was also a Jew, 1943 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. He worked at the Institute. Hitler's Germany was actually, in Hitler's Germany, it was a capital offense, or almost a capital offense, to send gold out of the country. The problem with these medals is they have their name on them. So the name of the recipients are there, and the fact that these things had been moved out of Germany, that they were now in Denmark. There was a big concern about this. So they're sure that if the names had gotten out and they had caught them, they would have been the invading forces would have had very severe consequences for these guys. So George Hevesy in 1962 wrote in his book Radioisotope Research. He talked about von Van Lauwer's medal. He says, I suggested that we bury them, but Bohr did not like the idea as the medal might be unearthed. I decided to dissolve it. While the invading forces marched in the streets of Copenhagen, I was busy dissolving Lauer and Frank's medals. After the war, the gold was recovered, and the Nobel Foundation generously presented Lauer and Frank with the new Nobel Prize medals. He also wrote that he actually wrote to who did he write? I'm sorry, to Van Lauer. He said, this dissolving gold is exceedingly difficult because it is inactive and very difficult to dissolve. So the Nazis came into his institute, Bohr's institute. They looked through everything for gold, and on the shelf there were a couple of bottles of a solution of nitric acid and hydrochloric acid, and the metal had been dissolved in there, and it was still gold, but it was in suspension or in a solution. And then after that, you can reverse the chemical process. The gold precipitates out. They brought it back to the Nobel Institute after the war was over, and then they recast the medals for these guys. So you talk about the smartest people on the planet being scientists. These guys knew exactly what to do and how to beat it. So a little sidetrack. Maybe only chemical engineers get a kick out of that, but I just thought it was kind of interesting. Here's what the back of the medal looks like. This happens to be Michael Brown's Nobel Prize medal between 1901 and 2022. I mentioned there are about 615 times these medals were awarded to 989 people in different organizations. Some people received the medal more than once. That means 954 individuals and 27 different organizations have received this award. This is actually, as I say, Michael Brown's Nobel Prize medal. Here's a picture of 3 of Nobel laureates, and they're standing at the Perot Museum of Science and Nature, and I'll tell you more about that and why that's important to Nobel Prize medals. Let's take a little look here too. There are 6 Nobel Prize medals at the Perot Museum. Alfred Gilman has one there. Michael Brown has one there. Joseph Goldstein and Norman Borlaug, Nobel Peace Prize. Johann Diessenhofer and Buse Beutler. Brown and Goldstein share the 85 medal. They had a lot to do with cholesterol research, and basically their work led to the development of statin drugs. So if you're on cholesterol lowering medication, you can thank Brown and Goldstein for that, or whatever you want to say about them. Diessenhofer's used X-ray crystallography to explain the process of photosynthesis. And we kind of understood photosynthesis and what it did, but it was really an incredible, he brought it down to the molecular level, which was really incredible. Beutler, he had a lot to do with protein receptors, disease-causing agents, development of prevention and therapies against all kinds of infections, cancer, and inflammatory diseases. And Al Gilman received a Nobel Prize in 1994 dealing with G proteins. Had a lot to do with use it through a lot of research in the eyes and with living organisms. Actually, I got this quote from Al. He said, "I was born with a scientific spoon in my mouth." And that means his dad was a scientist. And if you're in medicine and all, you know that the name Gilman and Gilman pharmacology was his dad. He wrote that work. My father was a scientist, and he was inspired early by trips to his lab and to science museums. A museum, I had to decide whether it was a museum or a closet. That was an easy decision, he said. Perhaps a youngster will see a Nobel Prize and say, I can do that. So if you go to the Perot Museum in Dallas, you'll see this display right here. There's 3 of the medals right there, and you've the other side is 3 more of them. That little squirrely thing down on the right here is actually the protein that Al found and actually made a model of. I was in his office, and I had no idea what it was. It looked like one of these things you put a marble in and you could watch it go down. And he explained that to me. I told him I read his paper and I didn't understand a word of it. He said, "Look, I'm teaching here at the university. My kids write papers. I don't understand any of them either." These were all wonderful guys that I worked with over the years. And I'll tell you a little more about them and appraisals of Nobel Prize medals after I tell you about the most famous Nobel Prize medals of all. One of the most famous Nobel Prize medals is for Francis Crick. You may know Francis Crick from DNA. In April of 2013, Heritage Auction sold one for $2.27 million. It came with the actual presentation. So the medal's on the left there, and you can see the presentation on the right, signed by the regents of the Nobel organization. You also may remember, manuscript collectors out there, that in 1953, Crick wrote a letter to his son, Michael, 7 pages long, and said that he had outlined the discovery of the structure and function of DNA and actually drew the DNA molecule. That letter sold in 2013 at Christie's for $6 million. So Heritage got the medal. Christie's got a separate letter that sold for significantly more. That was a record for a Nobel Prize medal, by the way. The next one is James Watson, and this is the other one. This sold at Christie's. Apparently, they got on top of that and made sure they got the next one. And they sold it for $4.75 million in December of 2014. The medal and Crick's letter was both of these. The medal. This medal and Crick's medal was made of 23 karat gold because it was prior. They received them prior to 1980. The interesting thing about that is before 2013 and 2014, there were very, very few gold medals had sold, and they sold for a pretty low range when you consider the significance of that. So when an appraiser had to look at gold medals of people that were donating medals to a museum or an institution, or even appraising them for estate tax liability, there wasn't much to go on. So if you were in the middle of an appraisal and you had the appraisal ready to deliver to your client, or maybe you delivered it to your client, and your client saw that Heritage was expecting to get over $2 million for Crick's medal, you might pick up your phone and call the appraiser and go, hey, I know I'm no Crick or Watson, but I got to be worth a little more than blah, blah, blah. So we ended up waiting a little bit to make the donation to find out if the Crick medal did really well, and it did. So we based values upon the Crick medal, obviously not as famous. Nobody was as famous as Crick or Watson. My next concern was what happens a year later when we found out the Watson medal comes up. What if this thing sells for 100 grand? Then we're all in trouble. The IRS is going to call and go, that's not really the value. We'd like to talk a little more about that. So things change every single day. And when you think about what could sell for more than $4.75 million, what kind of medal? I'm going to find out that just this past year, if I can get this thing to move. Come on, there it is. That the highest sale for a Nobel medal was Dmitry Muratov's 2021 Nobel Peace Prize medal. It sold this past June for $103.5 million. It was sold at Heritage. Now, this is a sale that is a different kind of a sale, and you wouldn't necessarily use this as a comparable sale if you're doing an appraisal, or to be able to quote it at these medals are worth this much. All of the proceeds went to UNICEF's humanitarian response for Ukrainian children displaced by war. This gentleman was pretty incredible. He was from Russia. He and Maria Ressa of the Philippines have been fighting for the survival of their news organizations for many years. A quote from the AP. Muratov, the longtime editor of newspaper Novaya Gazeta, saw the situation for independent media in Russia turn from bad to worse following Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th. The paper removed much of the war reporting from its website a week later in response to a new Russian law which threatened jail terms up to 15 years for publishing information disparaging the Russian military or deemed to be fake, in quotes. That can include mention of Russian forces harming civilians or suffering losses on the battlefield. All other major independent Russian media either closed down or had their websites blocked. Many Russian journalists just left the country. But Novaya Gazeta held out, printing 3 issues a week and reaching what Muratov said were 27 million readers in March. He received the Nobel Peace Prize for that. And as I said, Maria Ressa of the Philippines did the same thing. So this was a fundraiser. He also said that the Nobel Prize award of money that he got, he was also donating to the UNICEF cause as well. So there's one heck of a humanitarian. This is what the Nobel Peace Prize medal looks like. And you can see it's a lot different than the one we talked about too. Different design for sure. This is a picture of the 2022 Nobel Prize laureates, just to keep up on that. And frankly, as much as I like movies and all those kind of things, I think this is just way more significant. We should really have a ceremony as big as the Oscars for these people that do just absolutely amazing things. This is a Belarusian activist. Center for Civil Liberties, a Ukrainian democracy organization, and Memorial is a Russian human rights organization. It was just recently shut down by Putin. So these people were fighting for human rights, for freedom, and for freedom of speech. Hopefully, they will be safe. But an impressive award and something certainly deserved. There are other awards out there too. Here's a few other science medals. This happens to be the National Medal of Science. It's an American medal. It's awarded by the President of the United States. This happens to be Michael Brown's. He earned that in 1988. It's a bronze medal. You can see the little mark on the bottom here with the date and the copyright to go along with it. Other medals too are awards that you might find interesting that are out there. They're in the world and certainly have value. This is, let's look at, the one on the left is the Lasker Award. And the Lasker Award has been awarded since 1945 to living people who have made major contributions to medical science and have performed public service on behalf of medicine. It's administered by the Lasker Foundation. It was founded by Albert Lasker and his wife, Mary Woodward Lasker. The monetary award is $250,000. And if you're going to get you're going to get a Nobel Prize medal, you've probably earned a Lasker Award. And if you have a Lasker Award, you get a better chance of winning a Nobel Prize medal. It's a very prestigious award that most people don't really even know about. The Langley Gold Medal here on the right is, there's a Board of Regents that established the Langley Medal in 1908. It was suggested by Alexander Graham Bell to honor Samuel Langley, who was the third secretary of the institution of the Smithsonian and a famous pioneer in aeronautics. The medal was awarded for meritorious investigations in connection with science and aerodynamics and its application to aviation. Some of the people that have received this award are a guy you probably know of, Neil Armstrong, Werner von Braun, the rocket scientist that came over from Germany, and James Webb. James Webb was NASA's first director. And you might know James Webb because the telescope that we're getting incredible images from are coming from the Webb telescope, which has pretty much eclipsed the Hubble telescope as far as its quality. But James Webb, this is actually James Webb's medal. I don't have a picture of the back, and did some work for NASA and some of the family there too. So there's some science medals. Let's switch back, if we could, to some Grammy and gold records. This is the Recording Academy's mission is right up there too, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about these. Let me see if I got anybody here that's good. I don't have any hands up. That's pretty good. We're all set. So this happens to be Johnny Cash and June Carter's 1967 Grammy for Jackson. I won't sing it because I can't sing. And that was the best country and Western duet, trio, or group. Now, what's interesting about this is they weren't married at the time, so that's why it's June Carter, not June Carter Cash and Johnny Cash. They got married about a year later in March 1st of 1968. Johnny Cash's 1994 Grammy for Best Country Album, Unchained, sold for $9,000 in 2004. Grammy for best, maybe that might be 1997. I may have those dates wrong. Grammys are about 8.5 inches tall. They weigh about 5 pounds. They're cast from a metal now that the manufacturer is called Gramium, which is really probably like a pot metal or a German silver. German silver isn't German. It's kind of like a pot metal. It's usually got zinc in it. It's usually a non-ferrous metal. The earlier ones were made of lead, and they broke easily, so they got away from lead, probably for a lot of reasons, and they did that. I've got a few more Johnny Cash items for you, only because I happen to know a little about his family history and how they relate to awards. Take a look at this article. I'll explain what happened. Johnny Cash went to New York, and he got his wallet stolen. He didn't have any money. So since he was with Columbia Records, he goes to the Columbia Record office and said, "Can you give me a check? I need some money." They gave him a check made out to Johnny Cash for, I don't know how much. He took it to the bank. He said, "I'd like to cash this." And she said, "I'm sorry, you need ID." He says, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash." No, you didn't really say that, but he said that they wouldn't cash it. So he went back to Columbia Records. He got the album, Johnny Cash's Greatest Hits. It's got a picture of Johnny Cash on it. He walked back to the teller and said, "Look, here's my ID. This is me. I'm Johnny Cash." And they cashed the check. AP picked up that story a long time ago. It was probably in the 70s is my guess, maybe in the 80s, but I couldn't find a date on this particular article. In 2004, 1986, a 1986 Best Spoken Word for non-musical recording. Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Roy Orbison put together an album called Class of 55. It was Memphis's rock and roll homecoming. It sold for $187,200. Now, the other one I happened to show you was also back in 2004. And 2004 is an important date for Cash and Cash memorabilia because both June and John died right around there, and the family and the estate had to sell off a lot of their material in order to pay taxes. So Sotheby's had a big sale. I want to say Sotheby's. I might be wrong. Yeah, Sotheby's had a big sale, and it was a huge catalog. And because he had just died, and both June and John were very, very popular, they had a TV show. They were traveled all around the world. This stuff went really crazy. It has since gone down a little bit. A lot of that stuff was purchased by the person who now owns the Johnny Cash Museum in Nashville. So there you go. Here's another Grammy. This one is the National Academy of Recording Artists and Sciences, Paul McCartney and Wings, Best Pop Performance by a Duo. Band on Their Own was the song. This was not Paul McCartney's one. There were only 3 of them supposedly made. Linda got one, Paul got one, and this guy named Denny Lane got one. And if you know your music, Denny Lane was with Wings for about 10 years, from 71 to 81. He was also with the Moody Blues. So this one sold for $125,000. If that had been Paul McCartney's, you might have been added a 0 to that. That would just be something really exceptional. Anything earlier with the Beatles would probably be worth even substantially more. Many other Grammys of lesser known songs or lesser known performers or songwriters have sold for under $1,000, just so you know. Okay. Grammys and Gold Records, Recording Industry of America. That's their information about why they exist. And this is Bob Dylan's gold record. They are not gold. They are not necessarily even the record of that particular song or that particular album. They slap a label on it. I don't know if they're playable or not, or if they just found old records around and they either sprayed them gold or gold plated them. This one sold at Heritage this past November for $3,600. Johnny Cash's gold record for Walk the Line sold for $9,000 in 2004, again, at the Sotheby's sale. A gold record means you've sold 500,000 records. It used to mean you sold $1 million worth of records, not anymore. And a platinum records means you've sold 1 million records. And the Recording Industry Association of America tracks those record sales. Now we don't have records anymore. I don't know how they do that. All right, this is a little shot courtesy of Heritage Auctions. This is some of the results of some of theirs. You can see this Elton John gold record, 625. Couple Marshall Tucker bands there in the $800 range too. Let's talk a little about some other awards that you might see here. There's Tonys and Emmys and the People's Choice Award and the Heisman Trophy and the Golden Globe and the CMA Award and the People's Choice. That Heisman Trophy is Paul Hornung's Heisman Trophy, presented by the New York Downtown Athletic Association. It sold in December of 2020 for $378,000 at Sotheby's. Hornung, if you know, was Green Bay Packer running back in the 60s. The Antoinette Perry Award for Excellence in Broadway, better known as the Tony, recognizes excellence in Broadway theater. The awards are presented by the American Theater Wing and the Broadway League. They have them in New York City at one of the big Broadway theaters. This was Alan Bates, actor, dramatic star, Tony Award trophy and medallion for his performance in Budley, 1974. Heritage sold that for $17,000. The Emmy, that's Artie Johnson's Emmy, Outstanding Individual Achievement, and Rona Martin's Laugh-In. Rona Martin's Laugh-In ran from 67 to 73. This one sold for $5,000. Gloria Swanson's Golden Globe in the lower left sold for $51,000 in 2018. Probably one of her most famous movies, Sunset Boulevard, Paramount movie from 1950s. Below that, we got the Obie Award. The Obie in the lower right is award for off-Broadway, OB for off-Broadway. That's the Village Voice newspaper issues those. The CMA Award is just to the left of the little text there, and the People's Choice Award is to the right of the text. There are a lot of others. They're not nearly as, I guess, as prestigious. Everybody seems to have an award ceremony going on now, so it makes it interesting. It's still all about supply and demand and the desirability of that particular award. I want to touch on one more, even though we don't have We're not going to cover this tonight, but I'd like to do this probably as a separate award ceremony. And there's a variety of military medals that are really important, and I just wanted to cover some of those. There's the Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, the Purple Heart, upper left, Purple Heart, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, the Distinguished Flying Cross, that's the one right down in the center of the middle, non-conflict heroism medal, a lot of others like that as well. Let me make sure nobody has texted me and has any problems. Nope, I think we're good. So that's kind of what I want to cover about awards and medals. We're going to have a little time for questions, but I want to just cover a few more things till we get to that. And with that, I want to remind you there is some more stuff going on. You're going to get a letter of attendance that's going to be auto-generated. It's an email that will happen pretty much right after we close this thing out for the night. Please look for it. I can't regenerate it. I can't generate another letter of attendance. You can use that letter. It says, thanks for participating in, and it gives you the time you were there, the hour that we've scheduled it for. So you can use it for continuing education credits if you need it. Make a copy, make as many copies as you need, send it to all your professional organizations so you can get credit for whatever. This website, this webinar is going to be up on the Manuscript Society website. I need about a week to go through it. I have to do some editing and clean it up and then render it down. And we'll put it up there so you can watch it anytime. It shows up on YouTube. There's no cost. There's no entry fee. There's no password to get in. It's just there because that's part of what our mission is to make sure that people learn more about the interesting collectibles and manuscripts and collectibles that are out there as well. So watch for that. And again, if you have any questions about the content, you can go back and download some of the websites and the links that I provided in the presentation as well. And if someone has any questions about, was this really a professional development presentation, you can send them to that and they can see that it certainly is, or at least we hope so. I want to thank the trustees and staff of the Manuscript Society for allowing me to be the moderator, to host, and tonight to present, and especially to you for being part of the program. I'm really grateful that you've done that. There's more programs on the way. I'll tell you about those in just a second. If you have a topic you'd like to see here, please let me know. I'm going to give you my email in just a little bit. You can track me down. I'm all over the place on the web. You'll find me. You can call my cell. I don't care. You want to present a program. You have something that's interesting. I'll talk to you about the process to do that. It's not hard. We'd love to have you present. Just let me know about that. If you want to be an underwriter and you want to get a little support the organization and support this program, let me know. I'll give you a call and I'll explain how you can do that as well. What's coming up next? Next month, we have Susan Leahy, who is an expert, a truly expert in Asian culture, artifacts, and all kinds of information. It's the first Monday of April, the original Wikipedia, 18th Century Chinese Emperors Project. It's fascinating, and I just know a little bit about it. 350 scholars over the course of 10 years and hundreds of editors compiled 36,000 volumes, 2.3 million pages of a complete library, Chinese library. So it's unbelievable how it was done and how it was done in those days, and all that information, and what a critical piece of literature it actually is, or research literature it is. Manuscript Mondays, again, coming up. Keep an eye on that. A few things happening. We got a trip to Rome coming up, and we have our annual conference in Los Angeles. It's going to be a great, great day on the West Coast. And it's 5 days, a 5-day overall program if you come and join us. So take a look at manuscript.org. I'll show you where that is in just a second. Right there. And you'll be able to see that right there, manuscript.org. If you need more information from me, my email is brian@kathenes.com. I am going to bug out of this presentation so I can see hands going up if you have questions for me. So I will leave that there. I'm going to drag this thing over. Oops. I'm going to drag this thing over here, and I'm going to see if we can talk to you a little about it. Okay, I got a couple of questions here. Let's see. Valerie says, doesn't the Medal of Honor always belong to the U.S. government? Can it really be sold at auction? You are absolutely correct. It is not something that can be sold. And we'll talk more about that. So I wanted to put them up there because I thought they were really important too. Valerie asked what type of documentation manuscripts might be the awards come with. I think I may have seen some of the paperwork for some awards, but always separated from the awards. Is there a resource for this? And that's a great question, Valerie. Thank you. Yeah, there is. I would go to that particular organization's website. They'll talk about the limitations of all those things and what comes with them. Usually there are certificates that come with the Oscars, written, framed, laminated certificates. You saw that the Nobel Prize medal has that it's called a diploma. From that worked out great. You are absolutely correct, and that's where I would go. If you have specific questions, let me know. They usually the paper documents that go with them usually don't have the same value as the three-dimensional object, which is more well known. But to me, it's an important part of it, and really not complete without that too. Bill asks, was the Langley or Lasker Award missing a head? The Lasker Award is headless. It's a headless winged figure. And I don't know why there's no head on it, but none of them have them. When I first looked at it, I thought there might be something wrong with it, that somebody dropped it somewhere along the line, but it does not have a head. It is sculpted that way and designed to be that. All right. Also, I had not heard of any YouTube channel. Tell me about it. The best way, Bill, to get to the YouTube channel is through the manuscript.org website. And I have that on the screen that I'm sharing right now. Manuscript.org. If you go to Manuscript Monday, you know what I can do, since we got a little bit of time here and people are asking questions, I'm going to go right there now. Let's go to if I can spell manuscript. I should know how to do that, shouldn't I, since I've been a member for 30 years. This is what the website looks like. And if you scroll down, you can see Manuscript Mondays right here. If I click on Manuscript Mondays, I can read more right there. There's my upcoming Manuscript Monday, which we're right in the middle of. And if last month you were able to see the on-demand Manuscript Mondays, you can click on this one, and this was Animation Art, which was a program that was done by Melanie Smith. And if I click on that, it brings me right to the YouTube channel. I can open it up, and so you can go right there. That's probably the easiest way. I'm going to turn that down. I'm going to turn that off. There we go. So go to manuscript.org, scroll down to Manuscript Monday, and you'll see, I think there's 9 or 10 of them on there right now. And actually, if you just, you can also search Manuscript Society on YouTube, and you're going to find a lot of testimonials that some of our members have made about joining the Manuscript Society and all the benefits thereof. So I hope that answers a question for you there, Bill. I got Bill's hand up, so I think I got Bill. I'm going to take Bill's hand down. I'm going down the list to see if I missed anybody. We had a nice crowd tonight, which is really wonderful. And that, so if anybody has any questions, you can just raise your hand. I can unmute you if you want to ask me directly, or if we're done, then we're kind of done. I think we're about at the end here too. So if there's nothing else, I will wish you a happy Oscar night whenever we get there. And we'll catch you next Monday, first Monday of the month at the next Manuscript Monday. Y'all take care now. Thanks so much.